So I've got two stories from my monastic experience about how filters get set up that control how we perceive events and how we recollect events. So the first story is I'm working as an assistant for the head teacher at a retreat offsite. So I'm lugging around boxes, setting out tables, setting up chairs, things like that. And so I just kind of got to sit in the back and watch stuff go down. And it was all pretty new to me at that point, so I didn't really know what to expect. And at one point, a gentleman shared an issue that was going on in his life. It was sort of a Q&A session, and he was very distraught about some events going on in his life. And so the teacher just sort of started asking him a couple leading questions. Oh, well, what do you think about that? Oh, well, what have you tried? Well, what do you think you should do about that? And this guy laid it all out. Just perfect. He had 100% of the solution right there. It was kind of hard to understand why he was even bothering to ask the question. And when he got done, his attitude was sort of, well, what should I do about this? So the teacher just calmly went right back through and recited for him all of the things that he had just told her. And he was completely taken aback. He was awestruck. This was such incredible wisdom. He was so grateful. He was so thankful. And I think everybody in the room sort of was going, what? How does he not get that he just said that? And so then the teacher, to her credit, was just said, now, do you realize I haven't said anything other than what you just said to me a few minutes ago? This guy could not see it, could not get it, right? And the teacher went on to explain, because you think I'm so wise, you can hear it. But I've said nothing other than what you said to me. And that experience for me was really eye-opening, that here's somebody who has all the answers, can't hear the answers even as he's saying them. It's just the moment it leaves his lips, it's gone. And that really fascinated me. And then there was a follow-up where as soon as it was pointed out to him that he actually had produced the answer himself, he just shut down. He couldn't even accept those answers from the teacher. And she eventually said, okay, well, we got to move on. So here's what we're going to do. Tonight you're going to go to sleep, and in the morning you're going to wake up, and you're going to have the answer. It's going to be there for you. And, this guy's obviously a little skeptical at this point. He's not really receptive. But sure enough, the next day he came in and he was excited. He was enthusiastic. He was, brimming with energy. And when it came his time to share, he shared that it happened just like the teacher said. It was amazing. What was this miraculous power? And she just said, okay, well, what's the answer? And then he repeated exactly the same thing that he had said before, that she had repeated to him, that he then became unwilling to accept. Boom, there it was. But now it was fresh and new, and it was exactly the answer that was great for his life. And teacher just kind of smiled and said, okay, that sounds great. And for me, that was that's how religions get made, right? Because here's this person who's been working for decades to try to help people be happy human beings and has noticed this pattern that people have the information that they need available to them, but they can't actually take it in and perceive it for the valuable information that it is. And so if you just suggest to them a little bit, you can open up a little crack in this filter, and boom, here comes the information. It just comes right through because it was always available to them. And in fact, their mind is trying to present it to them constantly, and it's just failing to get through. So, if you have a shuckster, then that becomes a religion right there. But fortunately, to her credit, the teacher just said, hey, I'm not saying anything other than the information that you tell me. All of this is available to you. And we had similar experiences often sharing in group. So at a monastery, your only job is fundamentally to figure out how to be a happy human being, which is great. Recommend it to anybody who gets the opportunity. And so we would check in periodically. We would have little group discussions where we would meditate, and then we would come together and explain sort of what, you know, each person would go around and say what they were experiencing, how that was sort of feeding into the practice that we were working on at the time and whatnot. And we would have these nice little discussions. And they went on a sort of a cyclic pattern for a lot of people where somebody would have a really great period of time where they were really on top of it and they're having all these great insights and life was really looking up and this was all about to finally resolve itself, and then something would catch them, they get distracted, they go on the downward slide, and then a month, 2 months later, they'd come back in and they're back on the upswing, and so they've had this great insight, this great revelation. They can't wait to tell us about it. They'd start to tell us about it, and everybody in that room, after the first sentence, could finish the entire narration because we'd all heard everybody's great insight over and over and over again, because it was always the same great insight. You know, most folks don't have lots of problems sort of running simultaneously. They've got a big problem and then all this sort of secondary problems that feed off of that. And it was always impressive how powerful our capacity for forgetting is. So here's this great insight, and people are right to be excited. They are having great insights, and these are life-changing. And if they could only hang on to it and follow through with it, it would have the effect that they think it's going to have, but it's gone. A week later, 2 weeks later, they forgot this earth-shattering thing that's going to change their life. And at the monastery, credit to the folks there, they came up with some innovations. So they realized, hey, we live in a new world where recording is really easy. So they got everybody hooked up with smartphones and just said, here's a recording app. Every time you have a great earth-shattering insight, you're going to record this, and we're going to put you on a schedule where you're going to listen to all your recordings. Every day, you're going to cycle through some of your recordings at random so that the next time you forget your big insight, boom, there it is in your own voice in your ear, and that's going to enable you to hang on to this. And a lot of people who had, been treading water for a significant amount of time actually had big breakthroughs in their experience due to that practice. And what that drove home for me, just watching all this go down, was how important it is to document things, how important it is to get things out of your head, because when something's kicking around in your head, it has a certain sense and a certain sort of momentum to it. It's a bit like when you have a dream, you get dropped into a scenario that doesn't make any sense at all, but because you just appear and it's already going in a certain direction, you kind of cruise along with it, and it makes sense until you are out of that state and you go, oh, whoa, that was a wild dream. That's how we live our lives. These ideas are kicking around in our heads, and they have been since we were wee children, so they have their momentum and we keep cruising along with them. And it's only when it gets out of the head that it's, oh, that doesn't make any sense. And then the flip side of that is we have this great idea, this great insight. We know suddenly what the information that we needed was all along, but it's pushing against that momentum, and it just gets swept downstream in the tide and it's gone. So you don't need like some outside secret wisdom to lead a happy life. I think that's a big myth that people have about sort of spiritual practices and whatnot, that there's some secret that they have to learn and then that's going to unlock it. You have all the information that you need, actually. Most of us don't have really esoteric problems. We don't need esoteric knowledge. We have regular old problems, and we need actually regular old knowledge. Our minds are generating the wisdom that we need to solve the problems in our lives. We need to create the opportunity to perceive that, to really hear it. And since most of us have been trained since we're very small not to listen to that capacity of our mind, we have to teach ourselves to get out of the way. And once in a while, the clouds will part and some insights will slip through. And when that does happen, we've got to document. And that can be Journaling, my big favorite. Recording and listening worked wonders at the monastery. Um, I'm doing a series of videos because, hey, if I get the ideas out of my head and out where somebody else can see them, maybe they'll say, hey, you said a thing that was actually kind of cool, and I'll have long since forgot about it. So that's basically it. Don't underestimate the power of the filters that have been set up in your mind to keep you away from perceiving the wisdom that your mind's generating every day. Make sure that when you have a good idea, when you have an insight, it gets documented so that it just doesn't disappear into the fog of memory, and so that you can start making progress and building upon your insights and having a more happy human existence. That's it.